Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Okay, sounds is good. Everyone hear me at the back? Is your phone? Yeah? Okay. Okay. So good evening. Nice to be here in Singapore again. I recognize many of the faces and I don't know the names. This is the karma of a traveling monk. Can't remember the names, but I'm very happy to be here again. When was I last here? 2 years ago, I think? Yeah. So we've all gotten older. You have some gray hair, I only have white hair. Perhaps I could just start talking about that. So Buddhism has, of course, many considerations to help us live good life. So the Buddha's concern was for our happiness and well-being. And some of the teachings cover ethics, moral responsibility, family responsibility, now environmental responsibility. So there is a sense in Buddhism that we're not just individuals trying to get enlightened and the heck with all the rest, that we're embedded in society, that we have a duty to our families and friends. And the way that is portrayed quite often is the way of mutual respect and mutual care, which is quite a lovely way to think about your place in the universe or in Singapore. And so that sense of mutuality is one where the parents take care of the children take care of the parents, not just one way. Where the teachers take care of the students take care of the teachers, not just one way. Where the husband takes care of wife takes care of husband, employer takes care of employee takes care of employer, and so on. And this mutuality it's a very mature way, I think, of operating. It's hard for a kid to know that, it's not just about parents taking care of the kids, but the kids also taking care of the parents. Those things we learn later. So within that social context, the Buddha also obviously encourages us to understand our inner world. So that our outer world is directed by a life lived with compassion, a life lived with skill, developing skills so that we have good livelihood. And then the inner world is how our minds are responding to the daily events of life, day in and day out. How we are on the, do you have a subway or what do you have? You have a metro or what do you call it? AT? MRT. Okay, there you go. Each city has its own. How your mind is reacting to a crowded MRT train, or how you're dealing with social anxieties, or how you're dealing with a parent that is old and dying, or how you're dealing with success and failure. These worldly things always have some kind of inner reaction to it. And that inner reaction is obviously very important because although you live in Singapore, you also live in your mind. So each of us is having a different experience. We like it, we dislike it. And obviously if we don't understand our inner mind, our inner world, we can't really be at peace, and we'll always be victims to external circumstances. So I think we all understand that. That's sort of Buddhism 101. Buddhism 202 is to calm the mind, to learn how to make the mind composed. And so we meditate. We use various methods and techniques and so on. And in that vein, quite often we get confused by the different methods and techniques and teachers that come to us about how do you meditate and what's the goal of meditation. But quite simply, I would say that what we're trying to do in meditation is develop a sense of composure, collectedness, stillness, calmness, so that we can both have some sense of inner peace, but so that our minds are attentive to life as it presents itself. So a mind which is confused and scattered obviously isn't going to understand much. That's Buddhism 202. Now, Buddhism 303, I would say, is then all the ideas around the possibility of human enlightenment, the possibility of Buddhism not just being a stress reduction course. And why I say this, in the West now, there's a lot of emphasis on mindfulness, a lot of techniques on mindfulness and stress reduction, which is very good. Many of the medical facilities now in Canada, they actually teach nurses and doctors mindfulness and stress reduction, which is great. But I would say in Buddhism, that is a foundation for something more profound. I would say it is a method rather than an end in itself. Obviously, if I'm just stressed out and confused and reactive all the time, I've got to deal with that. I have to get that in place if I'm going to go deeper into understanding human consciousness. But if I just leave it like that, then I would say you're shortchanging the Buddha's teaching. Because the Buddha didn't teach for the sake of... Like, the Buddha didn't ordain because he was stressed out at work. Right? He didn't kind of say, well, I've got, this wife of mine, I can't handle her, and I don't want to be a king, so I'm out of here. No, the Buddha taught because... Yeah, it's actually good to go back to why the Buddha taught. I always go back to this kind of first principles. When I was in university, I was a terrible student. Now, the best student in my class, I even remember his name. He, whenever he had a problem in computing or physics or whatever, he would always go back to first principles. And then he would take the problem and build it up to the solution from first principles. I was just trying to plug in formula. I was a terrible student. He was very good. So first principles is for me important in understanding why I'm a monk and why I chose this teaching and what is my path and what is the direction of my path and does it fit in with those first principles that I understood and understand and used. And I think for everyone here, it's good to go back and say, why are you doing this? Why did you start? Why were you inspired to sit for an hour or two at a time with painful knees? And why do you continue to do this? And is what you're doing now answering those basic existential questions which you might have had about life, about meaning, about your own mind and your own place in the universe, and about your effectiveness in society? So for me, the story the Buddha gives us, which is a kind of analogous story, but the story of the four heavenly messengers. I think you all know that. So the Buddha portrays himself as the prince, Siddhartha, and he is protected by his father, and he has all the sense delights in the world, but he's curious, and he is doubtful, and he decides he wants to see what's out in the outer world. His dad's not up for it. His dad wants him to keep the family business going. But he goes out with Channa, the charioteer, and he goes into the village, and for the first time in his life he sees an old person. We know that story, right? And what hits him is the conceit of youth. He realizes that he is not destined to be young forever. He is destined to be old. And the conceit of youth falls away. The conceit, and youth is very conceited this way. I don't know about you, but when I was young, I really thought I'd just be healthy all the time and young all the time. Now I don't think so. White hair and so on. So the conceit of youth fell away. And I don't, it's a story the Buddha creates. I'm sure he had seen old age, but he had never really realized it for himself. And so there's something in human consciousness when you see, aging, that's me too, eventually. And so the second time he goes out and he sees a sick person, and the conceit of good health falls away. Yeah, that's my That's mine too. That's my destiny too. And then he sees an old person, racked with age, in pain, with osteoporosis and macular degeneration and all those things that old people get. And he sees, yeah, that's my lot too. So the conceit of old age, sickness and death. Death is the last one, isn't he? So he sees then a corpse. And he's never seen this before. And Channa, what's that? Channa says, oh, it's a dead person. We all die. So the conceit of life goes away. Now he's really worried. He said, wow, that's me? And that's the human mind questioning. Right? It's not that that's a story to tell us. When we start questioning like this, we become serious human beings. When we just live for consumerism or power or distraction, we're not serious human beings. We're children. Philosophically, we're children. And that questioning is very important to remember. The fourth heavenly messenger was a sadhu. So he goes out into the village and he sees a sadhu meditating and asks, Channa, who is that? So this fellow is sitting there, meditating, quiet, peaceful. And Channa says, that is a sadhu. And for me, what's really important in this part, it says, and he is seeking the deathless. That's the key for me to understand first principles in Buddhism. That he saw old age, sickness, and death. And then he saw sadhu. And then he heard for the first time this idea of the deathless. He had never heard that before. And you don't hear it in Western philosophy. There isn't such a concept in Western philosophy. And actually I asked William, who was it? William, you looked it up? I asked William on the trip from KL to here, look it up in Google. And Google didn't answer. So we stumped Google. What is the deathless? They didn't know. And it's a strange word. It's a strange word. But if you think about the Buddha's own inquiry, he sees old age, sickness, and death. He realizes, that's me too. Is that the only thing there is? Is there a way out? Is there some kind of realization which isn't dependent on the body and aging? And the culture says there is. The culture says there is the deathless. And then his renunciation. And then his idea is that I will practice for the sake of all sentient beings. I'll realize the deathless and I'll come back and help my culture. When Westerners see the Buddha leaving his family, they think he's a male chauvinist. He deserted his wife, like all those other men. Westerners are very critical, actually. But actually, he came back, right? And his son became Arahant, and his family joined up. But whether that story is true or not, if you take it as a reflection on the human condition, then you get back to the first principles of why the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught, the Buddha seeking, his aspiration was to realize the unconditioned. So he wasn't a stressed out businessman who did meditation in order to relieve stress. His aspiration was something more profound and more high and more deep. So then through his years of struggle, he realizes the deathless. So we have different words that talk about that. And we have Nirvana. But Nirvana doesn't work anymore because it was a rock group. Right? And it was a pretty depressing rock group because the leader committed suicide. Cobain was his name? Kurt Cobain, right? He was the lead singer of Nirvana, and he committed suicide. So he obviously didn't understand what Nirvana meant. Okay, so we cancel the word Nirvana maybe, and get another word. So the other words, you don't have to cancel the word, but the other words are unconditioned. Unconditioned. Now that's really difficult philosophically, because anything you think of is a condition. Good, bad, that's a condition. Big, small, peace is a condition. So you have a word which you can't define intellectually. Uncreated, same problem. Deathless. Well, you can see death, but deathless, that's difficult too. Amara, Amata Dhamma, Amarāvati, Amaro. So we have this language, and this is the language which is particular to Indian philosophy that exists, and particular to the Buddha's aspiration and realization. Now, how does it fit? How does it fit lay life? Like, you just want to be more relaxed and maybe win the lotto. Well, I think it's important because that puts into context why the Buddha taught about tanha. Why he taught that craving for experience could not be the goal of his enlightenment, because craving for experience is always about time. Like, if I want something in the future, that's time bound, that cannot be deathless. It has to be conditioned, if you see the logic of it. If there's something that I want later on, then that has to be conditioned by time. So whatever the deathless is, it has to be now. The only place it could be, it can't be then, in the future. It's not possible. And that's why I go back to the logic of it. For me, that's very important. And that's the word akalika. When we chant, the Dhamma is akaliko, not a matter of time. So if you're meditating in order to get a result in the future, that could not be the unconditioned. Alright? Getting that so far? So far, yeah? So then the emphasis is on the present moment. Now craving to get rid of this moment, or to have another kind of a moment, is about getting rid of this moment, changing it. It's not about being in this moment. Huh? So if I'm trying to get somewhere else or get rid of this moment, it can't be the road to the deathless. But if I begin to look at craving and begin to see it as an object and not believe in it, and see it as something arising and ceasing, then I'm practicing akalika, here and now Dhamma. Because I'm not trying to fulfill craving, I'm watching craving as an object. I'm aware of craving. And when craving ceases, that's one of the ways we define nibbana, or nirvana, or the unconditioned, the end of wanting. Now, wanting is a natural thing. I wanted a chair because my knee hurts. So there's nothing wrong with wanting. Wanting is biological. It's a good thing. Food, you want food, good. Eat, good, it's a good thing. Your mother will be happy. And your body will be happy if you don't eat too much. So there's nothing wrong with wanting, right? But wanting is always involved with conditions. It's always involved with happiness and unhappiness. There's nothing wrong with happiness and unhappiness. I try to be happy. If someone offers me a coffee, I say, milk, please. Right? I don't think, well, I want milk, so therefore I shouldn't have milk. That'd be silly, wouldn't it? It's just realizing the limits of wanting. That wanting is always about conditions, and that those conditions are always contingent on other things. So wanting has a place, but it can't be the pathway to the ultimate. Huh? So that's important, I think, in understanding logically why the Buddha teaches what it teaches. Now, I don't know about you, but from my Western upbringing, from a kind of Christian theological sense, wanting was seen to be evil and bad. It's bad to want. So sexuality is bad, and eating too much is bad, gluttony is bad, bad. So then if you want something, you feel guilty. That's not Buddhism. There's nothing wrong with sexuality. It has its limits, it has its boundaries, it has uses, and so on and so forth. But sexuality isn't the pathway to nibbana, because it's a condition. But the suppression of sexuality is also not the pathway to nibbana, because that's still tanha. Huh? It's still tanha. So you begin to see, okay, how can I stay in the present moment, here and now, with whatever's happening to me? Huh? With whatever's happening to me. And that's hard to do, because my mind is conditioned to seek the pleasant and to get rid of the unpleasant. And I do that to a certain extent, but I realize that pleasure is very limited, right? And I begin to meditate. Because I don't know about you, but before I started to meditate, I tried to maximize my pleasure and minimize my pain. Seemed a good strategy. Didn't work. Because always there was pain and discomfort and things like that. And only when I began to see, well, what if I just learn how to be with both pleasure and pain? What if I make that my practice? And I began to see that pleasure arises and ceases, and pain arises and ceases. And I would say, well, there's something, wait. There's something here and now that isn't dependent on pain and isn't dependent on pleasure. And that's awareness. Huh? Awareness is not dependent on gender. Like, there's no femininism in awareness, right? You could be a feminist, okay, and be aware that you're a feminist. And you could be a man and be aware that you're a man. But awareness does not have a gender, correct? You can't, that doesn't compute. Awareness knows gender, so awareness in this incarnation knows the condition of masculinity. I don't know the condition of femininity. Don't remember that. Maybe it happened to me. Women here know the condition of femininity, but femininity is not the same as awareness. And masculinity is not the same as awareness. Awareness knows, correct? Old age. So some of you are younger than me, your knees are obviously better than mine because I'm sitting up here. So painful knees, awareness does not depend on painful knees or good knees, correct? Right? You can have a happy knee and an unhappy knee. I know this knee is fairly happy and this knee is kind of unhappy. But the awareness is neither of those, it knows. Right? And so on and so forth. So awareness is very interesting because it's always here and now, and it's not dependent on a condition. It knows conditions. So if you take the logic back then, around the Buddha's aspiration to the unconditioned, you begin to see why awareness is so central. Huh? Why it's so central. And you can see why craving for pleasure and pain is problematic, because it is focused on conditions. It's always looking for conditions. So let's go. I started this talk with the intention of actually wanting to talk about Jara Dhamomi Jara Nganatito. I'm of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. You probably, do you chant that with your chanting books here? I'm of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. That implies that it's possible to go beyond dying. Have you ever thought about that? And we think, yeah, I'm of the nature to get sick. Yeah, okay. But the punchline is not that you and I are going to get sick, and we know that. It doesn't take a Buddha to tell us that. We all know we're going to get old. We all know that there's change. So that it doesn't take a Buddha to figure that one out. You know, John Smith next door knows that. What's the Buddha saying? Well, I have not gone beyond dying. There is something beyond death. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. Huh? So what could possibly be beyond dying? Well, the only thing you have is awareness. Awareness is the only thing that could know dying. Awareness is the only thing that could know gender. And awareness is the only thing that knows aging. Huh? So what if you trust in awareness rather than in the conditions? What if when I get sick, I go to the doctor, do diligence, and get all my scoping done and all the rest that I have to do, but I see that the body is not a refuge? Awareness of sickness is the refuge. Huh? Then that seems to me you're honoring the Buddha's aspiration, the Buddha's intention in both teaching and his realization. Now, the really good thing about this, it also has benefits for calming the mind. Because if I am aware of something like, let's say if you feel, let's say someone in your group says they got enlightened. You know, they're just radiant, right? And their halo is really nice and shiny, and they're walking around in a cloud, and they just started meditating yesterday. Now you've been doing, you've done 20 retreats, your knees are killing you, and you feel jealous, right? And then you say, rubbish, you can't be enlightened. And then you feel guilty about your jealousy. I shouldn't be jealous. I'm a good Buddhist. May you be well and happy. May you drop dead. And you get you're totally confused now, right? But if you take awareness, and you feel jealousy, and then you say, yeah, jealousy is this way. Jealousy is just like this. That's hard to do, right? Because on one hand, the jealousy wants to kill the other person, and then the guilt wants to kill the jealousy. Both of them, what are you doing? You're preoccupied with the khandhas. You're preoccupied with the condition. You're not abiding, you're not moving towards the unconditioned. You're preoccupied with the condition. You're preoccupied with emotion. You're preoccupied with social status. But awareness can know that, right? Awareness can know, I want to strangle this person, or I'm going to put a pin on their cushion and see if they're enlightened, or whatever you want to do. You can know hatred, but not be hateful. You can know jealousy, but not be jealous, can't you? I can dislike a person and not hate them. That's not hatred, it's just dislike, coming and going. But the beauty of it is it both alleviates that emotional stress, but it always takes you back to the gateway to the unconditioned awareness. So you can be aware with fear, you can be aware with love. Because awareness is not dependent on fear and love. And if your inner language favors love, if your inner thoughts favor compassion, then they will become stronger. And if they don't favor anger, and if they don't favor jealousy, those will weaken. So awareness will help you to liberate the mind from those negative conditions, but that's just a side story. That's not the goal. It couldn't be the goal because that's still conditioned. Because if you think that love is the goal, what do you do when you don't have love? You think you've lost it. And then you try to be a loving person. And then you suppress the love with self-hatred and you get in a shlamazel, a total mess. Right? But if you take refuge in awareness and then incline towards kindness, generosity, and you live a moral life, then that inclination, it's like a trending. It'll go viral in your own mind because that's how you're trending. But if you think that you should always be loving, you're still stuck in conditions because you can't always be loving. You're in the hospital bed now, and the nurse pricks you with the needle. Oh, you idiot! And then you get reborn. Oh no. But awareness doesn't get reborn. Awareness knows. Huh? Now, I was speaking to you earlier this morning, and Ajahn Buddhadasa, does anyone know him? He's a very famous Thai monk that taught and died, maybe 20 years ago. And when the translation of, he's Thai monk, so he did a commentary on mindfulness of breathing. And it's interesting how the translators translated mindfulness of breathing. They said mindfulness with breathing. Now for me as an English speaker, that's very significant because mindfulness with breathing is putting more attention on the awareness rather than the object of awareness. See what I mean? So if I say to you mindfulness with fear, you can do that. Mindfulness with anger, you can do that. And it's the same mindfulness. It's the same awareness. Mindfulness with breathing, mindfulness with heat, mindfulness with loss, mindfulness with jealousy. The awareness is the same. And the problem we have as Buddhists is that we try to control quite often, and we think that mindfulness is control. Whereas I would suggest that awareness is awakening. And you can awaken to anything, right? Now if you take a kind of dualistic attitude that only the good emotions should I have, and the bad emotions I should somehow control, then you're not mindful. You're not aware with jealousy. You're aware of the jealousy, and then you try to control it. So maybe you're jealous, and then you do metta bhavana, and it doesn't work. You do, may they be well, may they be, I hate them. No, may they be well. And it doesn't work. Because it's not aware. It's coming from aversion, from idealism, from all those other states of mind, and we never really awaken. So the difficulty in this practice is to awaken to these very difficult states of mind and just trust. Trust in right speech, trust in morality, but trust that this too will change. that you are not a jealous person, that jealousy arises and ceases. You are not that. And this is the idea, I think, that jara dhammami, I am of the nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. When you start to practice awareness, then you see the body is of the nature to die. Awareness isn't. That's very radical, very radical. Just contemplating death and thinking about death, why would that lead to a hunger for enlightenment? Why not just get drunk? This is a bad joke. I'm gonna, or why not just make lots of money? I'm gonna die anyway. You could say, well, I'll get reborn next lifetime as a turtle, so I better be a good boy. Yeah, you could do that, but that's not what the Buddha taught. He didn't taught for an upgrade. So Buddhist theory of rebirth is this kind of idea, well, I'll get an upgrade next time, but do you want to do this next time again? I mean, I've had enough. I don't know about you. So maybe it's not about becoming. And notice how, like, Buddhist ideas of rebirth is about becoming. Me becoming again? How much more do I want? Whereas non-becoming awareness knows the feeling of wanting to become. Awareness is not about becoming, it's about awakening. It's knowing. And the trouble we often have is a lack of patience, a lack of trust, a lack of endurance with the unendurable, with the difficult, with the negative. And it's certainly with my times in Thailand, where it was very austere and very boring. You wouldn't believe how boring it was. There was no one who could speak my language. I had a Pali dictionary which the termites ate. There was no coffee. I'd be in monasteries where no one could speak English. I didn't understand Thai. I had nothing except suffering. And lots of that. And then I'd try to meditate now. I'm not going to suffer. I'm going to meditate. I'm just going to meditate. And I couldn't do it because I was just trying to force my mind to be peaceful. And I didn't realize that by just being there and watching, I was developing patience with the unpleasant, with boredom, with heat, with confusion, with self-doubt. And Ajahn Chah would just say, be the knowing, be the knowing. This is the way it is now. This is the way it is now. Be the knowing. And it took, and what he would say, he would just encourage me by saying, you have to be patient. I'm sorry. You haven't developed the mind. You want to be a Buddha overnight? It doesn't work that way. Sorry. You have to be patient. So because I had great love and trust, okay, I'll be patient. And then being patient with these negative states of mind, what I was doing was allowing the negative karma to slowly fall away, but also, and more importantly, I was allowing mindfulness and awareness to be stronger with the way things were. With boredom, with heat, with self-doubt. And that's what he just kept encouraging. This will change. Anicca, my nan, it'll change. So that language, you notice the language of change, what it's doing, it's not getting you preoccupied with the khandhas, with the conditions. It's giving you a perspective. This will change. And that's a perspective enlightenment. You're not trying to fix it and get rid of it and become this super nice person. That's smarmy. Yeah? I mean, be a good person, sure. But trying to be perfect is painful. Like say to yourself, tomorrow morning, I will be perfect all day. That's stress. But I will awaken to the way things are. You can do that. If you feel grumpy, you can do that. If you don't, you can do that, can't you? So you take refuge in awakeness rather than the conditions. And then it works its way out. So I've rattled on for quite a while. Maybe those are some ideas that you could contemplate. Maybe I'll finish the talk here, but I could open to some questions and see if there's any understanding. There are queries? Please, yes.
So I actually have two questions. One is from someone that liked to be here but couldn't be here today.
Okay.
So his question is, because both of us listen to your podcast a lot.
Oh dear. You know all my jokes.
And the worldview in your podcast is to trust in your awareness of thoughts, bodily sensations, emotions, instead of the thoughts, bodily sensations, emotions themselves. And you also mentioned that awareness is unchanging.
Could you say that again, please? What I talk about?
Trust in your awareness of thoughts, bodily sensations, emotions, instead of the thoughts, bodily sensations, or emotions themselves.
Okay, all right.
And when you trust in that, it's because your awareness is unchanging, but the other factors are all temporary. So the question is, if awareness is unchanging, surely that also changes with old age and death. Well, that's what you'll find out, but again, like my friend in hospital now, I think that's kind of disappearing, so maybe he's, your friend is maybe talking about dementia or something like that. I don't know how dementia works, but certainly, say my mother, she lived to be 96, and her awareness was the same when she was 30. Her experience of aging was certainly different, and her maturity and the pain level she had, that was certainly different. But again, I would say that awareness is not a quality of consciousness, it is consciousness. Whereas the aging process is a quality of experience. So then the question people often ask, what about Alzheimer's? And I don't know. No one can report back when the sense of personhood is gone. But let's say my friend is in hospital now, and he's had a brain lesion. He's just had an operation. He's a monk. He's been a monk for 14 years, and he's an old-time practitioner. And he is now experiencing memory loss from that operation and confusion. But he's quite aware of confusion, and his attention goes very quickly to chanting. And now he hasn't got dementia. He knows who he is and so on. But he sometimes not recognize people in the room. But the awareness is still there, and and because he's practiced a lot of chanting, he goes to the chanting quite automatically, and he's quite lucid in the talking about that. So I would, if your friend was here, I'd ask him, what do they actually mean by awareness? Huh? Is that sort of good enough, or? I think so.
Okay.
My second question is, when you were talking about awareness and love and mindfulness of the love that you give, but also not, I guess, give into that suffering of that love. But surely when you have come from a place of loving kindness and consciousness and being mindful of that love, it should spread out to other people as well, though, right?
Sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. So I think for the enlightened person, there are no other persons. So the necessity of saying me and you no longer exists. So I'm not there, right? So what we're faced with is through the very definition of self, we're faced with the definition of otherness, and in that sense of otherness, quite often we feel threatened or whatever. And even though one would like to have loving kindness towards that person, the condition of the mind is such that maybe that doesn't exist. So if one then sees loving kindness as rather than a dualistic thing of me and you, one takes on a different definition of loving kindness as that which includes all experience. That takes you away from the definition of love as may I be well, may you be well, to love as an allowing of all phenomena to arise and cease. And this is, are you familiar with the Five Khandhas teaching? Okay, say our experience is a sense experience of mind-body experience.
which we witness to as a flow of experiences. And then we define those experiences as me and you. So one way that we could consider this discussion we're having now is that you're sitting there, I'm sitting here. Your mic is expressing sounds from your side, my mic is expressing that. So that's the conventional sense of me and you. But there's a kind of curious other way to look at this, is that this whole experience of me and you is in awareness. And that's not a usual perception. Usually we hold to the perception I'm here and you're there, which is necessary, because your knees are not my knees. So that's not wrong. But this other possible perception, which we don't usually consider, is that this whole experience is in awareness. This room, the sense of spatial, your presence over there, sound out there, body here, is in awareness. Now when we take that on board, then all conditioned phenomena are flowing in awareness. They're coming and they're going. And then that definition of when you use the word metta is like Ajahn Sumedho's, it all belongs. Greed belongs, hatred belongs, love belongs, because they arise and they cease in this flow of consciousness. They're not you. They're phenomena. And this is a very difficult way to perceive, because we perceive, and we have to survive, that I am a man or I am a woman and I have my responsibilities, which we call the conventional realm. The Buddha doesn't dismiss that. He actually encourages living well in that way. But then he says, what is this other possibility? What is awareness? And when you take metta bhavana as may I be well, may you be well, that's useful. That's very good. But when you take it into this larger context, and I use my Ajahn Sumedho, my teacher's references a lot. He says it's like this, as a statement of fact, which stops the mind, stills the mind. It's like this. It's not asking you to divine this moment, it's just like this. And if you take that on board, your mind goes still. And he adds to that the corollary, it all belongs. Now, I know some of my friends in Ottawa, they say, well, it all belongs. I don't like that. Because they say, well, no, Hitler doesn't belong. Or other politicians that you might think of. But it's not condoning anything. It's just getting the mind to that space which allows things to arise and cease, arise and cease. And that, I think, is the higher idea of metta bhavana. Not an emotional love, or not even a liking, but something grander which sees that even the liking and disliking is simply phenomena arising and ceasing. Otherwise you become preoccupied with phenomena. Now certainly, the more you do that, the attention tends to abide in the heart chakra, and there is a welcoming of phenomena coming and going. And there is a connection to life. There is a connection to people. There is a caring for people. Certainly that evolves very, very strongly. But it doesn't come from idealism. It comes from realism of the way things are and taking this larger stance. It's a difficult perception, this idea. I use this a lot myself. I'll play around. I'll listen to sound and I'll take suchness. Sound is like this. So that brings me to stillness. If I comment on the sound, that's not sound. If I say it's loud sound, sweet sound, beautiful sound, that's not sound, it's thought. So I use sound then, it's like this. That takes to stillness very quickly. And then I use my body, then I feel my hands maybe. Hands, it's like this. Same stillness. Then I listen to sound. And I say, sound is in awareness. And then I take that perception, hands are in awareness. And I begin to see that the perception of sound is in space, or conscious space, whatever you want to call it, and so is the perception of hands. And I begin to intuit what peace is. Peace is neither good sound or bad sound, good feeling or bad feeling, it's that conscious space behind it. But this is very pragmatic, it's not like a theory. It's something I do as a perception. So I'm in the airport, right? Sitting in the airport and waiting for the plane. I wait a lot for planes now. The trip, I did a flight from Penang to KL, took 5 hours. I won't go into that, long time. A lot of planes. So then I'm in the airport, and I sit there. Airport is in awareness. And it's very peaceful. And then my mind starts to think, and anxiety is in awareness. It's the same awareness. So the mind keeps letting go of conditions and opening to peace. And that's very subtle. In the beginning, it's like, what? Because peace is not like an experience per se of, like when you eat a salty fish, right away you know it's salty. When you eat an ice cream cone, you know it's sweet. So you get an instant hit of experience. This is much, much, much more subtle. When you say this is in awareness, it's so what? And there you have to wait. And desire doesn't want to wait. It wants an experience. So you start to look for something. So I think where we fail is actually in waiting. Because most of us are determined people. We work hard, and we'll sit and so on. But that determination, if it's based on time, getting something won't work. It'll frustrate you. So then you just awaken the mind and wait. Is that all? And you see how difficult that is to do. Does that help? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you.
Pleasure, yeah. Yes, please. In the back. We could get the mic to the back, please. Yes.
Good evening, Luang Por.
Good evening.
I just wonder that our ultimate truth is merely knowing the 4 elements. And that's all.
Well, ultimate truth is this moment. If you stop thinking, this moment is truth. It's like this. You can analyze it, right? But then in that analysis, it's like this. So you see, the problem with the word truth is that it sounds like a conclusion to me, right? Truth is that E equals MC squared. Or truth is that 4 and 4 equals 8, or something like that. So we look for an objective thing called truth. Or then you take something like the 4 elements. But how do you actually experience life right now before you take on a scriptural definition? You experience it like this. And that has no definition. You can put a definition on it that it's the solid element, it's the air element, and so on, but that's thought. My mind doesn't dissect things like that. My mind just knows. It knows it's like this. Bas, finished. Now, I can analyze it into things, which is okay, but what is the purpose of doing that? Well, for me, the purpose would be to bring the mind to letting go, to non-grasping, to awareness. So, one way of looking at right understanding, like we have samadhi, right? Right understanding. Well, you could say right understanding is the 4 Noble Truths, or you could say it's anicca dukkha anatta, and you could put out various kind of doctrinal statements that Theravāda says about right understanding, and that would be correct, and they're helpful. But another way to look at right understanding that life is like this now. And I understand life right now because I know what's going on. And then I can think about it and say, well, like if I'm bored with a talk, I say, this is really boring or interesting or whatever. But before I say anything about this moment, it's like this. And that silence, I think, is what we're moving towards. The silence of no commentary. The silence of knowing and trusting. And that, it's very hard to do because our minds are so busy talking and judging and analyzing. So where you have that in the Bahia Sutta. And is everyone familiar with the Bahia Sutta? He was the quickest to get enlightened, so you want to read that one. Very important. In the suttas they talk about the most philosophical and the most, Moggallana had the most powers and so on and so forth. Well, Bahia was the speedo. He was the quickest to get enlightened. And just to repeat for you, you probably know the sutta, but so Bahia is He's an ascetic in India, and he has a feeling that he's almost enlightened or on the road to enlightenment. And a friendly deva, we have friendly devas in Buddhism, comes to him and says, Bahiya, you don't know. You're not on the path to enlightenment. But there is Gautama Buddha in Savatthi at Jetavana who is enlightened. Seek him out quickly. So Bahiya is very inspired and heads for Savatthi, gets to Savatthi, gets to Jetavana Grove, and finds that the Buddha is on alms round. He goes into the town, finds the monks, Buddha on alms, and he drops to the ground, bows to Bahiya, and says to the Buddha, bows to the Buddha, and says to the Buddha, Sir, Lord, please give me teaching, just a little bit of teaching. And the Buddha says, this isn't the time, this is the time for Pindapad. And Bahiya is very adamant, and he says, please, Lord, just a little bit of teaching, life is short, we don't know when death will come. And the Buddha says, always 3 times, he says, Bahiya, no, this is time for alms round. Bahiya asks a 3rd time, and then the Lord finally says, Bahiya, okay, take this teaching and breathe. Bahiya, you should train thus. In the seen, there should be just the seen. In the heard, there should be just the heard. In the sensed, there should be just the sensed. In the cognized, there should be just the cognized. And when Bahiya, for you, in the seen, there's just the seen. In the heard, there's just the heard. In the sensed, there's just the sensed. In the cognized, there's just the cognized. Then, Bahiya, for you, there will be no here, no there, no in between. Just this is the end of suffering. It's very enigmatic. Right? So if you try that, if you just listen, So what we're doing is Bahiya's instruction now. In the hearing, there's just the hearing. Okay, so if you just listen, you have to do that. If you just believe in that sutta, you're not doing it. So the Buddha is saying to Bahiya, you got to do this. So you do it. You read the sutta, okay, I'll give that a go. If it's the fastest way possible, let's go for it. So, but you have to do it. So in hearing, there's just hearing. Can you find a hearer? Is there someone hearing? Or is it like, can you say, I am hearing? There's hearing for sure, right? But is there an extra bit called I am? And then the hearing is like 2 bits? You have to look. Oh, so you look, okay. Hearing. I can't find an I am. Can you? That extra bit? What's he talking about? You say, well, sure, I am hearing. Well, that's a word. That's a thought. Just listen. There's hearing. So, you got to play around with it. But I suggest that to do that is very, very difficult, because then you'll start to think, am I hearing? Am I hearing correctly? Do I have to hear more? And you just start thinking and analyzing and trying to figure. But just in hearing, is there a me and a hearing, or is there just hearing? And is there an over there and a here, or is there just this situation? So I suggest that's, anyway, to end the sutta, the Buddha then carries on the alms round, and you probably all read this, but they come to the gates of the town, they exit the gates of the town, and Bahiya is dead. He's been gored by a bull. And the monks ask, Lord, what should we do with Bahiya's body? And they say, burn the body, venerate the ashes, because Bahiya attained to enlightenment in that alms round. So he's known as the one who had the quickest enlightenment. But this isn't something you can believe in, because if you believe in it, so what? You know? But actually to train in it and practice it is very interesting. Now apply that to something like, well, I was talking about jealousy. In the cognized, there's just the cognized. Now that's more difficult, because the emotions just run with thought. Like if you let's say you get betrayed by someone, you've been good to them, and then they stab you in the back, and you get blindsided. Wow, that's a strong emotion. You're really, really angry now.
To just say, in the betrayed, in the cognized, there's just the cognized. It's very difficult. First of all, you have to practice sila, not kill the person. Or murder them or whatever. You get rage. And you can see you can see the principle is like, if I feel a strong emotion, to say that in the cognized, there's just the cognized, it would just be an energy. But your mind would so quickly run to thought, there would be me and him, me and her, me and them, I'm going to get them. And it'd be very hard not to run with the thinking mind. It'd be very, very difficult. So much of our work is just being patient with these negative emotions. But as we begin to cool out a bit and these more extreme emotions start to go away, I think we need to take this teaching deeply and see what are they pointing to here, the unconditioned. Why did the Buddha do this? And if we take those as first principles, then that will guide us as we deepen our practice, I should say. Did that help with your question, with the 4 elements there? Madam, with your eyes closed. No? Are you with me? Did that help, the question? Or?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
If I can't see the arising and passing away every single moment, that means my mindfulness and my concentration is weak.
Say more slowly, please.
If I can see the arising and passing away all the time, it simply means I lack in between the mindfulness and I lack concentration.
You lack? Is that the word? I'm not hearing it.
I'm not mindful and my mind is not concentrated enough.
I would be wary of the word concentration. I would use more still knowing. Concentration implies focus and control. I don't find the word concentration actually very helpful. What I find more helpful is composure, collectedness, stillness, calmness around anything. So when you portray awareness as a concentration, I think that engages you with the khandhas in a way which prevents you from seeing the unconditioned. Because now you're concentrating on conditions. Think about it. If you're so focused on anapanasati, on the breath, that you don't notice anything else, you're focusing on the conditioned. How can you realize the unconditioned? Whereas if you are aware with breathing, awareness with breathing, then you're emphasizing awareness rather than conditions. So it's the non-grasping of conditions which is important. And how do you do that? You do it by awareness. So I would say, I think the word concentration can be very problematic because we get into a sense of control, and there's still a me and a controller. Whereas the awake mind isn't trying to control anything. It knows. It's like this. It's very free. I mean, that's my take on it. I mean, obviously, Theravāda has 1,000,001 considerations around that. But the word around like concentration and some of the words around samadhi come from interpretations which like the Thai language doesn't use concentration. They use samruam, which means like composed or calm. They use a whole different language for samma samadhi. English somehow has gotten into this word concentration and made it very, very high, but from my little, I don't understand probably what I've read, my understanding is that the word around samma samadhi is more like composure, and Thai language represents that better, as do I think some of the Burmese languages. And I think the Chinese too, the Chinese renderings of it is more like composure and calm, rather than focus and control and concentration. But anyway, I'm not saying this is the absolute definition, but from my own mind, those words are more helpful to me. And because language has an effect, doesn't it? The way you use language affects you. So I find like stillness, calm, presence. These are words that work better for me. Okay? Anyone else?
waiting is interesting, isn't it? You notice that you're waiting for something rather than knowing what is?
Thank you very much, Ajahn, for the most inspiring talk. Is it possible for you to guide us through a short sitting meditation to show us how to be aware in breathing?
Okay, if we take a 5-minute break, and those who don't want to meditate can leave. Yeah, really, because maybe your knees are killing you. So, would that work? Is that the organizers? Would that be okay, or is that okay? So why don't we you stand up, stretch your leg. We won't sit for long, I promise. But if you want to stretch your legs a bit, and then we'll maybe we'll meditate for 15 minutes or something. Would that be good? Okay. And then if anyone has a bus to catch or wants to go to the noodle shop or whatever, please carry on.
Thank you very much for your talk.
Yes.
While waiting, just have a couple of announcements. So Luang Por will be giving Dhamma talks over the next 2 days. So for tomorrow night, it will be 7:30 p.m. at the Buddhist library, and on Thursday evening, it will be 7:30 p.m. at NDR, Geylang Lorong 29. And also there will be a morning Dhamma session at NDR as well on Thursday morning, 11 a.m. So if you have any food offerings to bring, please arrive at least half an hour before the session to give some time for the preparation of the food offerings. And also at Luang Por's monastery, Tisarana Buddhist monastery, currently a new meditation hall is being constructed. So if you would like to contribute to this meritorious project, you may do so in a donation box that will be placed in the front afterwards.
What's that Buddha made of? What's this? Is it a stone or is it cast, concrete, or? You guys live here, you should know. No?
No one's there to touch.
It's a strange color stone, isn't it? I've never seen that color. Is it some kind of jade? Do they have gray jade? No? So, shall we do some meditation? So I assume you all have meditated and you know about posture and so on. So I'll skip those intros. Listen to sound. Now listen to sound. Let the sound come to you. You're not pursuing any sound. Just listen to sound. Feel your hands. So you localize your attention to your hands, and then you wait, and the feelings in the hands become conscious. So you're not focusing on the hands or concentrating on the hands. You're just localizing your attention. Let the feelings in the hands become conscious. There's no strain. Feel your hands. Listen to sound. Feel your hands. Listen to sound. Now perceive sound as in awareness. Sound as in awareness. Now feel your hands. And perceive those sensations as in awareness. Sound in awareness. Hands in awareness. Notice that they're both objects in awareness. Listen to sound. Perceive the changing nature of sound. Notice change. Feel your hands. Notice the changing nature. Move between sound, hands, what is changing, and what is unchanging. So this establishes the awake mind, the knowing. Awareness knows sound, knows hands. So be that awareness now. Now feel your breath. Just feel the breath. Just feel the body breathing. So we practice awareness with breathing. Now when I say be aware of the breath, do you tighten your eyes? Do you look for the breath? I would say that is kind of controlling. So let the body breathe. Notice the changing nature of breath in awareness. When you notice yourself thinking, then just awaken that thought is in awareness. Don't try to get rid of thought. It's something in awareness. So awareness with the breath. Not control, not focus, not concentration. Just the awake mind, knowing the way things are, breath by breath. All right, let's stop there. That makes sense? The lady that asked? Yeah? You see what I mean? So I'm not emphasizing concentration on the object. I'm emphasizing the awake mind. To me, that's very important. Concentration you need if you're, like if I'm using a power tool, I do a lot of woodwork, and I once put my thumb through a, you see my thumb is shorter, I put it through a table saw, not a good idea. So I wasn't focused. Well, I was focused, but I was using a short push stick, but whatever. That's concentration, yeah. So there's nothing wrong with concentration. But the trouble with concentration is that you're very much preoccupied with a condition, all right? And if you're preoccupied with a condition, how can you realize the unconditioned? Logically, if you get, I think quite often people don't take the logic of the Buddhist teaching into play, and don't consider, why is he teaching the way he's teaching? So, and one of the languages, words I like to use is availability and preoccupation. If I'm preoccupied with a khandha, with a body of formation, I'm not available for the unconditioned. Logically, can't be, right? So, I think that use of the word concentration, I think it's rather unfortunate. I do like the Thai translations much, much better. Composure, stillness, I find them better. But that's me. Okay. All right? Is that Sufi? Is that good enough? Okay.
Let's show our appreciation by saying 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.